Welcome to the Lovers Lounge podcast, where we talk to experts and other guests on topics related to love, relationships, and sex. I am your host, Tina Love, and on this episode, we are talking to De-Andrea Blaylock-Johnson. She is a social worker and a sex therapist at Sankofa Sex Therapy, LLC. Hey, De-Andrea, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, yes. I am just really, really excited to talk with you. This show for me is all about educating people about love, relationships, and sex and different topics related to those. And I know that a lot of people
Mhm.
think, well, I don't know everything. I don't need to learn anything about nothing. You know what I'm saying? But I think that we can learn something every day. There's always something that we can learn. And so I'm really, really excited to have you on. There's just a lot of topics that I want to cover with you and your work. But before we do, I'd like you to tell me a little bit about yourself and the work that you do at Sankofa Sex Therapy, LLC.
Okay, perfect. I have been in private practice for a long time, but I created Sankofa Sex Therapy in 2015. And there I see individuals and those in all types of relationships. And I really help a lot of different clients, like I said, individuals and those in relationships, to reach their own self-defined goals as it relates to sexuality or just relationship challenges that they may be facing. In addition to doing therapy in the practice, I also provide a lot of workshops around the city. I'm in the St. Louis area, and that could be with youth organizations, but also with different adult situations, because we can definitely benefit from sexuality education throughout the lifespan. Uh, so yeah, that's kind of a little bit of who I am and where I'm coming from. My training is in social work. I have both a bachelor's and master's degree in social work, and I'm licensed in the state of Missouri as a clinical social worker. And like I said, the focus of my work is primarily sexuality and relationship therapy.
Okay. Yes. And so you have a lot of clients then that come to you and they are experiencing different things. Can you just talk a
Hmm.
little bit about the types of issues that you address in your work?
Sure, absolutely. So I see a lot of people who come to me for whether it's inability to orgasm, it could be lack of desire within as it relates to sexuality. In addition to uh, general relationship issues, whether it's difficulty with communication or relating specifically to sexuality, which could be mixed match libido amongst the partners. Yeah, so just a lot of different things. But in addition to kind of reclaiming your own, your sense of your sexual self, whether that could be after trauma or even after a relationship ends. So yeah, those are some of the different things that I see in my practice.
Okay. And we're going to touch on some of those things. You mentioned arousal and,
Hmm.
clients that may have issues with their arousal. What tends to cause this? And can you just kind of expound on what a client might be experiencing then and how you help them?
Right. So low sexual desire or arousal can be caused by a lot of different things. When I work with clients, I am very careful to consider different physiological factors that could be causing any sexual changes, in addition to other psychological factors. So, uh, low sex, lowered sex drive could be related to depression or anxiety, or even the medications that are used to treat depression and anxiety, as well as other medications that people may be taking for whether it's high blood pressure or or any myriad of uh, medical conditions. So definitely considering all of those physiological factors in addition to looking at the whole picture of the person. What's going on? Was there a time where they had higher sex drive and then something occurred where it kind of tapered off? And really just looking at, are they making space for sex in their lives? What I see often is sometimes specifically those in relationships, they may get into a specific routine and not making a space for sex, like just expecting for it to happen. But when different things happen, when relationships change or when kids come into the picture, spontaneity is not always
Right.
an option.
Right.
And so you definitely have to make space for that.
Yeah.
So it's definitely about looking at the whole picture of the person, looking at those physiological factors as well as psychological and environmental to kind of put the puzzle together and see what's going on.
Right. So you mentioned, just I want to kind of have a follow up question to that because you mentioned
Mm-hmm.
someone that might be taking, let's say, antidepressant medication.
Mm-hmm.
Those
Mm-hmm.
types of medications can be known to perhaps, like you just said, hinder arousal. So
Right.
if you determine that it's caused by medication, of course the person has to
Mm-hmm.
probably continue taking the medication. So
Right.
how do you treat this? And is there a way that they can uh, have arousal even though they're taking their medication?
Yeah. Right. So I'm thinking of the typical model of arousal, or how we think sex kind of has to happen, whether it's just the idea that's kind of romanticized that I feel this certain urge in my body. And then once I feel that and my body tells me I'm ready, then it's like, okay, I'm ready to go. However, there's a different model of arousal where instead of waiting for your body to give you the signal, you may decide that, okay, I think I want to have sex today. So I am going to do things to make myself feel sexy or do things to get my body to that point of arousal because it may not happen naturally.
Okay.
So we kind of have to flip our idea of how things are supposed to work into something that will make sense for our bodies and our situation.
I see. Okay. And so, kind of the same thing with a person that might be experiencing some anxiety or depression. They would have to do pretty
Mm-hmm.
much the same thing, kind of step
Right.
outside of themselves, maybe use things to kind of aid and help along in the process, then, is what I'm hearing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It could be experimenting with different stimuli, such as different toys, or even sharing fantasies with each other. Like those are different things that may not play into the idea of spontaneity, but in preparing for it, it helps us to um, increase our ability to prepare our bodies for sex.
Okay. All right. And we're going to dig deeper into this. I don't know, people are listening, and, for whatever reason, there are some people that just really kind of feel uncomfortable with these types of topics. When you talk
Oh
about,
yeah.
yeah, when you talk about sex in general, I remember when I said to some folks, they said, well, what's your podcast going to be about? And I said, love, relationships, and sex. And you could just see,
Hmm.
people kind of cringe when I said sex. It's like, yeah, sex.
Hmm.
It's a thing. But anyway,
Yes.
people get a little nervous about this, but I hope that they're able to kind of hang in there with these topics that we're going to talk about because I'm going to shift gears a little bit. You
Okay.
have helped women or men who've had some trauma around
Hmm.
being raped, or some molestation issues, and those issues have, kind of played a part negatively in their marriage and or relationships. Can you kind of expound on, a client that might be experiencing that, and kind of talk about how you work with them.
Sure. I think that often when people survive sexual trauma, they uh, may have the idea that that part of themselves may no longer be theirs. It may not be their own because it was taken and abused by someone. And so uh, often when clients come to me, it may not be to necessarily work through the trauma that they experienced. They may have worked with a therapist specifically for the trauma, but often what they're coming to me for is to reclaim that sexuality and create a healthy relationship with that part of themselves. And so in doing that, it involves a lot of really learning, like I said, to reclaim that could be uh, doing various activities, whether it's solo sex or with a partner, but to really learn to be present in your body. Because often when people experience sexual trauma, they may kind of, mentally escape to survive that
Mm,
experience.
okay.
And so in reclaiming your sexuality, it's learning to really come back into your body and reclaim your body as a safe space. And so I do a lot of activities that involve mindfulness and just being present with your body and learning to accept and love and appreciate your body for taking you through that trauma and then being able to be present to enjoy pleasure.
Right. I would imagine this, as I mentioned, it causes a problem perhaps in their marriages or relationships. Does the
Hmm.
spouse of the person ever join your therapy sessions, maybe to accompany this person who has been raped or molested and having this concern?
Yeah, often, when people do come to me for this concern specifically, and they are in a relationship, often it's a joint decision
Hmm.
of okay, this is our issue to deal with, not just you go get it.
Right, right,
it let's work through this together because this is part of our relationship. This is part of our story, not just part of your story. And so healing can then be a part of our story. And so I definitely appreciate when partners are present to um, to participate in that healing.
yes,
Um, and it definitely helps, specifically with different activities that we may do, so that if the partner is included, then um, we can, like I said, do those joint activities, and I can give specific directions and all of that.
and do you find when you give the directions and perhaps you send them home and they work on these things for a week or two and they come back to you
Hmm.
as a follow up and you're like, okay,
Hmm.
so how have things been since I've seen you? And so what's been happening? Do you find that they are they able to turn some things around? Do some of the exercises and different things that you're sending them off to do, does it work? What's the feedback?
What I notice is that often in coming to the session, I'm able to just give permission to talk about what they may not have spoken about before openly. It may have been like a source of contention where when they started to talk about it, it became an argument. But part of actually the sex therapy model is called the implicit model. It's in thinking of sexuality education, counseling, and therapy, where P is for permission, the LI is for limited information, and that's kind of what sexuality educators provide.
Mm-hmm.
Specific suggestions is what sexuality counselors provide, and then the intensive therapy, that's what sexuality therapists provide.
Mm-hmm.
So when they come to me, I start off with the peace. I start off with the permission. And in giving, just opening the door to the conversation, what I noticed, it's kind of almost like a honeymoon effect.
Mm.
immediately. I'm like, okay, now let's not get too excited. We still got some work to do,
Okay.
but
Right.
um, but just opening the door for that permission, just
Yeah.
to talk about the situation without that pressure, it's very well. It's very helpful,
Yeah.
and it gives us a great place from which to
Yes.
launch our work.
Right. I mean, I can imagine probably for you when you see this thing sort of turn around and you see improvement, just how
Mm-hmm.
much you get from that, and I can just imagine it's such a payoff for you as a professional.
Oh, it's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's incredibly rewarding throughout my career, and I've always worked in mental health in some capacity. I've graduated with my master's degree in 2005, and have consistently worked in behavioral health. Um, that is probably that is the reward to see
Yeah.
some type of progress.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so we're heading up the hill a little bit more, so it's gonna get a little
All
little
right.
little, little something. I don't know, but you mentioned solo sex a little bit ago, which
Mhm.
brings me
Mhm.
to recently I had a guest on my show, Dr. Laurie Mintz. She was a
Mhm.
professor and a sex educator out of Florida. She actually works at the University of Florida, and she wrote a book called Becoming Clitorate and talking about um, the equality of the orgasm gap and that kind of thing. But at any rate, she spoke about how important it is to have clitoral stimulation. And so basically,
Mhm.
talking about stimulating your clitoris, whether you are um, doing this solo or with a partner.
Mhm.
So basically, masturbation. And oh, I know people just kind of get, oh my goodness, when you say masturbation, like, oh goodness, there are so many things that happen to folks, I tell you. Um, People get a little uncomfortable. They get a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so I kind of want to first off talk about why you think that is. Why is there such angst around the issue of
Mhm.
masturbation, whether it is a man or a woman? Why do people get so
Mhm.
uncomfortable? First off, why are they uncomfortable for solo sex? Let's talk about that first.
I think that it's very interesting. Overall, I think that it is seen as normal and almost expected for men and boys to masturbate.
Mm-hmm.
However, it is seen as a big no-no for girls and women
Mm-hmm.
to seek pleasure. And I think it goes into issues of misogyny and the idea of owning someone else's sexuality. And I just think about how some negative things that people may have been taught that, when you get married, well, you're just having sex for your husband and it's really not for you. It's just so that your husband doesn't stray. And so
Wow.
I think in using and thinking about that perspective, um, women and girls aren't given the freedom to own their sexuality. It's seen as being something for their future mate.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because of that, well, why do you need to touch your vulva? And I think about how, friends or even some clients or even just have said that they've been taught that your husband will know how to please you. You don't have to
Wow.
worry about that.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Yeah. And so when they, are taught, to uh, only wait until you're married to have your sexual initiation, and then it's going to be this wonderful thing, and it's not. It's like, wait a minute, what's happening? You're met
Yeah.
with disappointment.
Right.
But part of it is because women and girls are not taught overall. Um, and I'm talking in very broad terms because I was taught in my house something different than what
Yeah.
society kind of teaches. But women overall are taught to not masturbate, not touch themselves.
Yes.
Um, for the, people are even taught that that their vulvas are not clean
Nasty. Yes.
or
Yeah.
nasty, all of those different things. And so, and it's even the idea that if you know what you like and what feels good, then you are a nasty woman.
Right. Right. And there's shame around
It's
that.
something that's,
Yeah.
yeah, there's shame
Yes.
around that. And so, uh, all of those reasons, I think, contribute to why the idea of solo sex is so shunned. And and I've noticed that I've definitely changed my vocabulary around it because masturbation itself is, well, it's not a cute word, but it has such a negative connotation.
Right.
And so I've definitely changed when I'm talking about masturbation. I say solo sex um, because it doesn't have the same negative connotation, although it means the same exact thing, right? It's self pleasure,
Right.
but yeah. So all of those reasons, I think that's why a lot of people are af- afraid even of exploring their bodies because it's seen as dirty or nasty, or I don't need to do that, or I shouldn't do that for whatever reason,
Right.
and expecting someone else to know, your buttons to push.
Yeah.
How they don't know? That's not fair. You need to.
It's your body.
I
Yeah.
think that it's exactly. I think
Wow.
it's important for you to understand your own body and understand what feels good to you, so that when you do decide to share with someone, it's not a guessing game. You can say, "I like this. I don't like that."
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And you can move from there.
I've talked to other guests about the fact that we really do have limited sexual education in schools
Mhm.
for kids.
Mhm.
I think one of my guests said there's like maybe 5 states in our country that have good sex education. So when you
Mhm.
said earlier, your husband will know how to please you, that's the thought. And I'm
Mhm.
thinking to myself,
Mhm.
I don't really know about that. They may think
Yeah.
they know, but where are they
Mhm.
learning
But
it
I
from?
don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah, because where are they learning it from?
Exactly.
Right, because it's not
And
being
then
taught in
and,
school. Hmm.
and it's not being taught in school, and often they may be learning it from pornography.
That's what I was
And
getting at. Yeah,
I'm not. Yeah, I'm not completely against pornography. However, I think it's important to understand that they're actors.
right,
They're doing what looks good on camera, not necessarily what always feels good. And
exactly.
so, if if your only sexuality education is coming from people who are performing, then it's not full education, because you'll go to do something and it's like, your partner's body don't move that way, or that
Right.
doesn't feel good, because what they don't show, on camera is the use of lubricant or the stretching that may have happened beforehand, or
Right, right, right,
just the preparation for whatever occurred.
right,
So
right. And I think
yeah.
it's sad too, in that unfortunately some of this sort of makes people think, or I'm just going to say men. Maybe a man might think
Mhm.
that uh, the way that it was done on this show or this, video or
Mhm.
film is what I should do
Mhm.
to my partner or my uh,
Mhm.
spouse. And every lady isn't excited by things that maybe they've seen or
Mhm.
maybe even done with someone else. So everyone is individual, right? And uh,
Right.
and that's why it's so important to know your body and be able to
Mhm.
answer to what feels good and what doesn't. Yeah, yeah. So
and
go
and
ahead.
not just know your body, yeah, not just know your body, but be comfortable enough to share with who you're sharing your body with your wants and desires. I think a lot of times people are, they're willing to have sex with somebody, but to have a conversation about sex feels a little awkward.
Right,
And so I think that we should make the make it comfortable, make the culture be okay, let's talk about this.
Yeah.
Let's say this is what I like, this is what I don't like, and let that be a thing.
Right.
Um,
And here's that communication again, because this is just a trend
mhm.
in all of my shows. We always come to the fact that it's so important to communicate. And I think
Right.
oftentimes, do you think, DeAndrea, that maybe women are a little reluctant to saying also because they don't want to make the man feel bad? Because the man is
Oh
just,
yeah.
rubbing and touching in areas and just thinking that, he just knows he's getting down. Okay.
Oh
Um,
yeah. Oh yeah.
and
And
so the
I'm certain of that. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's what I was just gonna say. And so the woman is sort of reluctant. And how do I say this? Because we're not good at communication, right? Some people just go on and let the person just sit there and do that, and that does not feel good. But you're not gonna
Yeah.
say one word. So why do you think
Right.
that? Do you think that kind of plays a part in sometimes why women don't speak up, or men?
Absolutely. It plays a huge part. I think part of it is fear of rejection.
Yeah.
Because if I am too critical, if I'm coming off too critical, then you may reject me. And I don't want to feel rejected. So I'm going to lay here. And even though I don't like when you put your finger here, I may not say anything. Um, as opposed to speaking up and saying, I would really like if you did this instead of that. Um, but it goes to, I think, that fear of rejection or fear of hurting, their partner's feelings or bruising their ego.
Right.
Um, when their cervix may be bruised. I mean, you have to talk. You gotta speak up for yourself.
Okay.
But it's definitely easier said than done.
Right.
But it's a matter of changing the culture of what's normal.
Yeah. Yeah. So speaking of bruised ego, so I know a
Hmm.
couple, right, that the husband actually revealed to his wife that he masturbates from time to time. So this was a
Hmm.
news flash for her, and she became really upset and started questioning
Hmm.
him about, okay, so why do you do that? So what's this about? So, and became a little defensive. And so the conversation didn't
Hmm.
really go well. And so he's like, okay, I'll never talk about that again. And I won't let her know that I'm doing this. Why do you think generally
Hmm.
someone might take offense or become upset like this female did in this scenario?
I think often people look at masturbation or solo sex as a replacement for sex with a partner, when in reality it can serve as just a general part of healthy sexual expression. Um, when someone masturbates, it doesn't mean that it doesn't automatically mean a rejection of their partner. Um, it could be, I just want to knock one off and go to sleep.
Yes.
It could be, um, my partner is unavailable right now, and I'm sensitive to that, and so I'm going to masturbate. Or it just could be, I want to experience some pleasure right now, and it doesn't have anything to do with my partner.
Right. Okay.
And
So,
so yeah, like I said, our ideas about masturbation and solo sex is that they're doing it because they don't want to be with me. When in reality, it it ain't always got nothing to do with you.
right. That could
It
not
could
be
just
further from the
be,
truth. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So it's just important that when you hear these things, I guess I'm just thinking about the person that might be listening and they're thinking, yeah, my husband said that to me and I got really upset. So, what do we
Hmm.
say to her? What do we say to that sister girl right now that's listening, or this young lady that, just seemed to get so riled up about it?
Hmm.
How do we put her at ease? Let's calm her down a little bit, right? She needs to just calm down. Is that it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's just, solo sex can be a part of just healthy sexual expression that doesn't have anything to do with rejecting you as a sexual partner. It's just an opportunity to experience pleasure, and sometimes uh, for specifically for people who decide not to engage in sexual activity when they are on their monthly cycle. That could be a way for their partner to meet their sexual needs.
Hmm.
So, and like I said, sometimes it ain't about you. It's just
Right.
this feels good.
Right.
I
Right.
want to I want to do this because this feels good, and nobody's well. No one is harmed in this process. Um, and touching my body feels good. So
Right.
it's not always just a rejection or a reflection of the relationship. It's just an opportunity to experience pleasure.
Right. Okay. And so I'm so glad you just said that word because
Mm-hmm.
while you were talking, I was just thinking about the fact that, there are some people that are even uncomfortable with the fact that there is pleasure involved, that there's a hang up
Mm-hmm.
about the pleasure, and that
Yeah.
maybe pleasure is only for, procreation and sex and not,
Mm-hmm.
just to have. So, have you heard of that? And is that sometimes people's perspective?
Yeah, and my biggest counter to that is that specifically if I'm working with folks uh, who are Christian or
Mm-hmm.
are
Yes.
and so if we believe that we are fearfully and wonderfully made,
Yes.
as uh, Psalm tells us, um, then God created the clitoris. Now, the clitoris, the only purpose of the clitoris is to experience pleasure. It is a wonderful thing that God created, and I'm so grateful that in His infinite wisdom He created the clitoris. And so it does not aid in procreation. It does
Right.
not aid in, the eggs being fertilized. The
Right.
only purpose of
Purely.
it
Mm-hmm.
is purely to experience pleasure.
Yeah.
And so if we believe that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, so is the clitoris, and its only purpose is pleasure. So if its only purpose is that, then what makes sense to me is
Why?
that God wants us to experience
Yeah. Why aren't
pleasure.
we using it? Yes. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's got between 4,000 and 8,000 nerves, and it's just in the head, in the part of the clitoris that's external. But there's a wonderful inner working. The internal clitoris is amazing as well. That can be stimulated
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
in different ways. But all of those nerve endings, and I'm not supposed to experience pleasure from it.
So what's
That
that
just
about?
don't make no sense.
Okay. It really doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah,
So now,
yeah.
and there are some health benefits to solo sex and masturbation. What are some of those health benefits
Hmm.
that a person can experience as it
Right.
relates to masturbation? Yeah.
So the science behind it it's the idea that you release the all of the feel good chemicals in your brain and in your body, um, and with those, it can help with relieving stress. It can help you to fall asleep because some people that may be their part of their bedtime ritual where it's like, okay, I'm going to love on myself a little bit, experience a little bit of pleasure, and go right to
Have
sleep.
sweet dreams. Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
have sweet dreams, right, right. And so, yeah, it like I said, it's related to all of those feel good chemicals in our brain, releasing those at the point of orgasm. Um, but not every sexual encounter has to end in orgasm.
Right.
I think a lot of times we put so much pressure to have an orgasm, which causes people to feel that they have to perform and take orgasms. Um,
Right.
so yeah, it doesn't have to be the focus of it. You can still have a wonderful, beautiful, fulfilling sexual experience without an orgasm. As long as pleasure was there and you were fulfilled, uh, and there was full consent all around the board,
Right.
then you're good. But orgasm doesn't have to be the goal, but just
Always. Hmm.
uh, in addition to those benefits of like the brain chemicals at the point of orgasm, there's also increased blood flow to the genitals, um, which help, and that's part of arousal as well.
Right, right. And
But
as you were saying that,
yeah, go
DeAndre, I was
ahead.
thinking about the fact that there's so much also pressure around, for men and thinking that if that's not the end result for the female, then I've not,
Hmm.
let's say, well, I ain't put it down. I ain't did something right, or something like
Yeah,
that. But not
yeah,
understanding that for a lot of females, that may
hmm,
not be the end result. Um, but
right.
it's okay. But it's okay.
And also understanding what an orgasm is. I think people take for granted that everyone knows what an orgasm is. So for people with vulvas, an orgasm is the involuntary muscle contractions that occur within the vagina.
Mm-hmm.
Um, some people think so that an orgasm has to include female ejaculation, but those are two separate things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've had clients say, I've never had an orgasm. But when we talk about like what an orgasm actually is, it's like, oh, I have had that. I've just never had female ejaculation. I'm like, oh, that's something different. Okay.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Yeah.
so, but yeah, just, so that's one thing, understanding what an orgasm is, and then not putting so much pressure on it. And I think, like I said, putting that pressure, that's what causes uh, a lot of folks to fake orgasms,
Right.
because it's like, oh, if I
Say.
don't
Mm-hmm.
come, then my
Mm-hmm.
partner's gonna feel like,
He didn't do
they didn't
something or
do
she
their
did. Yeah.
job,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And yeah, and so, and you could be fulfilled, and it's like, it didn't happen tonight, and that's all right. It might
Right.
happen in the morning. We'll go for round two.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. So we're going to shift gears a little bit. Well, not really, because we've kind of talked. We did mention pornography, but I want to get into this a little bit more. Because there are
Mhm.
some similar issues. We've really kind of talked a lot about, shame and just misunderstanding and
Mhm.
misconceptions around all of these topics that we've discussed. And so now I want to move
Mhm.
into pornography. Because there's a huge
Mhm.
controversy among sex educators and sex therapists regarding pornography. Some believe that it is indeed addictive, and there are some that say
Mhm.
no, that's it's not addictive. Some people believing
Mhm.
that it's not healthy, some saying that well, no, that's not true.
Mhm.
So if someone does view pornography, there are many that go strictly to, okay, well, it is a sin, it is an addiction, and it is harmful, and you shouldn't do it, and so
Mhm.
whatever. um so
Mhm.
what's your take on this, DeAndrea, regarding pornography?
Yeah. I think that it can be a healthy part of someone's sexual expression, but I think that it's important that they understand that it's entertainment. Because if you're, and we kind of touched on this earlier, but if your only sexuality education is coming from porn, then you're expecting your sexual encounters to look this way, then it can be definitely unhealthy. I'm thinking about, there was a movie that came out several years ago called Don John, and it showed a young man who um, really looked at pornography as being the end all say all of how sex was supposed to go.
Mm,
And when it didn't go that way, um, it was like, yeah, this isn't how it's supposed to be. So he was actually kind of like a, a he was very popular. he had
mm-hmm,
he had a lot of sex with a lot of women, and after almost every encounter, he would not necessarily be fulfilled, but he would turn on his computer, and like part of the movie was the sound of his computer coming on,
mm-hmm,
and he would watch porn to masturbate.
mm-hmm.
And so part of it was he was used to a certain type of stimulation
Stimuli.
only,
Yes.
um, and needed to have that to reach orgasm or to feel fulfilled. And so when you're using pornography in that way, where it becomes something that interferes with your ability to handle your regular everyday responsibilities, or it interferes with your ability to connect with someone in front of you,
Hmm.
then it's a problem.
Problematic.
But
Yes.
if you're, yeah, but if it's something that you may use as stimuli, whether it's through solo sex or whether it's when you're with a partner, that can be something that's healthy. But if it becomes something that that is, like I said, interfering with your ability to connect with others and your ability to take care of your responsibilities,
Right.
then it's problematic.
An addiction.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It kind of reminds me of I used to work in substance abuse, drug and alcohol, substance
Mhm.
abuse counseling,
Mhm.
and we used to talk about the fact that an addiction basically is when it
Mhm.
begins to cause problems in your life. So you're missing work because
Mhm.
you're drunk or you're high, or you are spending all
Yeah.
of your money on drugs, or these
Mhm.
types of things. It's starting to cause problems in your life. Then we know and can say that it is an addiction. But just to have a casual
Mhm.
drink, just because I decide I want to have a cranberry juice and vodka, don't look at me and say, oh, she's
Mhm.
addicted, she's alcoholic, you know what I
Right.
mean? Because no,
Right. Right.
that may not be, that's not the truth. So similar,
Right.
yeah, similar to what I was talking about earlier about the couple. So what would you say
Mhm.
to a person who they have found out that their husband um, is viewing pornography and very upset about it.
Mhm.
So, what would your response
Yeah.
be to that for that person?
I I would like to explore um, their ideas about pornography. Because if you have one partner who has the idea of, I just watch it every once in a while, really, I only watch it when I'm not having sex with my wife, to masturbate to get my needs met. Um, but if the wife is feeling like pornography is bad, so I would probably explore, where did those ideas come from? Um, is that a stable opinion? Stable meaning that it's not going to change.
Right.
If it can change, then how can we? What will that look like? And so, is pornography something that can be a healthy part of the relationship, or is it something that can't be? And it's definitely a case by case situation where in explaining that, uh, they're only using it, you know sparingly. It's not impacting our love making. It's not impacting the way that my partner cares for me. Then, like, they may be able to accept it. Um, and so it's a lot of, I ask a lot of questions in my line of work, but really just to understand, like, where the ideas are coming from, or what the ideas are that are coming from, and then um, them if the idea is changing is even an option.
Right. Okay. So I said we were going to go deeper. We're going to start talking about sexual addiction now. Because I can remember when there was talk that Halle Berry's ex husband, Eric Benet, battled
Hmm.
sex addiction. I know that there's been talk that Amy Winehouse, Michael Douglas, Charlie Sheen, the list goes on, but really that they struggle or have struggled with sex
Hmm.
addiction. So I really want to have you define what this looks like. What is sex addiction? And then, how can a person know if they are addicted to sex? What are the telltale signs?
Sure. So, the organization that I'm a part of, the American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselors, and Therapists, doesn't use the term sexual addiction. We kind of look at it as sexual compulsivity or out of control sexual behavior. And so, I'll just give a definition here for out of control sexual behavior, as defined by Douglas Ron Harvey, who's one of the lead researchers and developers of this idea of out of control sexual behavior. He defines it as a sexual health problem in which an individual's consensual sexual urges, thoughts, and behaviors feel out of control to them.
Mm-hmm.
And then further viewing out of control sexual behavior as a problem, not a sexual disorder or an illness. Um, and then another researcher and therapist, Neil Cannon, uh, kind of finds that out of control sexual behavior it's not always about sex, but it's rather about untreated trauma and abuse or
Mm.
untreated mental health issues, unresolved relationship issues, and problematic habits. So instead of looking at it through the lens of addiction, my philosophy and treatment model kind of leans towards looking at it as out of control sexual behavior, sexual compulsivity.
Okay. All right. So so if a person is let's see, what could be some of the signs then? So uh you just have, sex, out of control sex with just various different partners, and you're very promiscuous. Would that be sort of what you're saying, out of control sort of?
Well, yeah, and I think part of it is for that individual is it problematic to them?
Yeah, okay.
Um, because I I've had people to say, "Oh, my partner is a sex addict," and I said, "Well, what does that mean?"
Mhm.
And their definition may be, "My partner wants to have sex 3 times a week, and I only want to have sex 1 time a week. They just
Right.
want it too much." So that's not necessarily,
Right.
you know,
Out of control behavior.
out
Yeah.
of control sexual, right? But to an individual, if they get to a point and they're like, it's interfering with my ability to carry out my responsibilities.
Right.
So instead of picking up the kids from school
Yes.
on time, I am masturbating.
Right. Okay.
Instead of
Doing
going
one.
to this meeting that I'm supposed to go to, I am hooking up with someone. And
Yes.
I'm not talking about like a one time situation where it's like I'm gonna blow this off,
No.
but
Repeatedly.
where it's,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
repeated uh, infringements upon
Yes.
your responsibilities. And like I said, how the Harvey defines it, where the behavior is still out of control to that person.
Okay.
Um, that's what out of control sexual behavior
All right.
can be.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. So, we're going to shift gears
Hmm.
once again. And I think this is the last little hill we're going to go over. Um,
Okay.
and this one is regarding the LGBTQ community. Um, you
Hmm.
have clients that come in and they struggle with their sexuality. There's a lot of shame
Hmm.
around this, maybe for one reason or another. Can you talk about this and then where some of this shame is coming from, what they're experiencing?
Yeah. Yeah. So I work with clients who identify along the spectrums of gender and sexuality. So a lot of times they're, I've had a few clients who identify as Christian, grew up Christian, and they then realize that, okay, I am same gender loving, So what I've learned in church is that that's a sin, or and so how do I reconcile that? And so, in working with it, we kind of sometimes it might be a little Bible study. Sometimes it might be just a, a really coming to your own understanding of how to wrestle with those questions
Mm-hmm.
and still participate in faith. So, my personal opinion is that God created diversity on purpose. I know that may be heresy to some people, but I am in the position of not being someone's pastor. So there are some, ideas that I can personally hold that allow me to then hold space in a therapeutic setting to serve a lot of people.
Right.
Um, however, um, like I do honor the struggle that a lot of people have when they've been told their whole lives that who they are as a person is a sin. And so sometimes we just have to wrestle with that in session. What does that look like? Can you love a God that you think doesn't love you? And so like these are tough questions,
Yeah.
that we end up wrestling with. But like I said, because I come from a space that is more affirming and not just accepting, um, affirming someone's humanity, affirming someone's right to exist in their body as they are and as they choose to express themselves. Um, just that openness, that freedom to
Right.
be who you are, and that safe space
Right.
allows people to wrestle with these questions because we don't often have that safe space just to be.
Right.
And so giving that space and holding that space allows people to kind of wrestle with those. They're not necessarily struggling with their sexuality. It's like, I know who I am and I know who I love, but what I'm struggling with is, does God still love me?
Well, yes, and I think
So,
what I'm thinking when I
yeah.
say struggling, in that there may be
Hmm.
some that are struggling with it being out in the open, letting people know
Oh,
about it
yeah.
because there's so much shame about it.
Hmm.
So if I'm
Oh,
and
yeah.
and let me just say, you mentioned you're not in the business of being someone's pastor. um,
Hmm.
but you are a Christian. You've been raised in the
Oh,
church. Is
yeah.
that correct? Yeah. So,
Yes.
and
Yes.
there's some kind of there's stigma around that. There are people who will go to their
Hmm.
grave, um, without
Yeah.
letting being out or open and letting people know
Hmm.
about this. You've got folks in the church that are indeed gay, lesbian, but they will not under any
Hmm.
circumstances um, admit that and come out.
Yeah.
So that's what
Yeah.
I
Because
mean.
it may
What
not be
about struggle?
safe.
Yeah.
Yeah. It may not be safe for them to. And allowing people to live in that space of understanding that they don't have to come out if they don't want to.
Right.
I think of a few people that I know who are same gender loving and they choose not to be out for various reasons.
Right.
It could be because um, their parents are leaders in the faith community,
Yeah.
and they're not sure of how, how they would accept them, and also they may be even concerned about like reputation or whatnot. Like there are various reasons why people choose to not be out, and I definitely hold space to honor that because it could be for safety.
Yeah.
It just may not be safe for them to be out. So then figuring out how to navigate that.
Right, right. We could
Um,
we could go have
yeah.
a show just on this topic because there are some statistics that are
Mhm.
just astounding when you look at the
Yeah.
violence that occurs and
Mhm.
against
Mhm.
LGBTQ. So we might have you come on again and talk about that, and also the fact that you have a book in which, or you're writing some chapters in a book. Can you just kind of share about that and its relation to faith and religion and all of that?
Sure. Yeah, I am. writing a chapter in a book, and the title is still working, so I won't share the title of it, but it is about providing sex therapy to those who are indigenous, racialized, and people of color. And it's an intersectional approach um, to that. And so the authors of the various titles of the various chapters are all people of color. And my chapter is specifically about using narrative therapy as a way to kind of work through church hurt and some of the negative things that we've learned in church
Yes.
to reclaim your own sexuality and understand it as a divine gift from God and embrace the erotic.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm going to have you come back on because, I have some other questions to ask, but I mean, we're just running out of time. We could just talk, for
Yeah,
hours about some of this. But I particularly want to have
yeah.
you come back once the book is done and completed. We can talk about it and we can further our conversation around the LGBTQ community and some of the struggles and issues that families go through as a result, of who they are. You know. Um,
Hmm.
so, Deandra, how can our listeners hear more from you? How can they perhaps ask you more questions or see more of your philosophy on some things? Maybe even get therapy from you. How can they do that?
Okay. My website is sankofasextherapy.com. That's S as in Sam, Ankofa. It's a dinker symbol, and I absolutely love the dinker symbols. I have my house decorated with them, but sankofasextherapy.com. And I am at Sankofa Sex on Twitter and Instagram and Tumblr. And I also have a YouTube show, Ask a Sex Therapist. I haven't posted it in a little bit, but I have a good number of videos there where I answer user submitted questions related to sex and sexuality. And I still answer questions when people email them to askasextherapist@gmail.com.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Like I said, I'm going to have you come back because I have some other questions for you, not just around the other topics I mentioned, but there's some other things that I want to talk about with you. So we are surely going to have you come back. So thanks a lot. And
Awesome. Thank you.
yes, well, thanks everyone for joining this episode of the Lovers Lounge podcast, where we talk to experts and other guests on topics related to love, relationships, and sex. I am your host, Tina Love, and until next time, peace and, of course, love.